Hey, how's everybody doing? It's Parshat Pekudei, which is pretty rare. Usually we read the two Parshas Vayakel Pekudei together. And this time it's a leap year, this second Adar. So we separate the two Parshas and we read Pekudei on its own. So in the Parsha, which I'm going to connect to Purim soon because there's not so much interesting relevant material in the parsha, but there is an interesting disagreement, or not exactly disagreement, but discrepancy between what Moshe tells Bezalel to create. He says, create the Aron and the ark in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and the other vessels, and then create the Mishkan. Or he says in these words, he says, et ha'aron ve'et ha'mishkan. In the verse that he talks about it, whereas when Hashem tells Moshe to tell Bezalel to create the Mishkan, he says, actually, create the Mishkan and the Aron and the other vessels. Meaning, first, obviously, it makes sense to first create the Mishkan and then create the vessels. And Moshe tells it differently to Bezalel. And Bezalel there's a back and forth. And in the end of the day, Bezalel does create it the way Hashem initially commanded it, which is first the Mishkan and then the vessels, which actually makes sense, right? So, first you create a house and then you put the furniture in it, as opposed to first creating the ark, which it goes into the Mishkan, and the other vessels and have nowhere to put them. They kind of sit outside and they may rust in the rain until you have a chance to build the Mishkan. So it's just a strange discrepancy. Like, why is there just this disagreement, and how does Bezalel realize that you should do one and not the other, and why would Moshe change the order? So Netivat Shalom says in his very Hasidic way, but very obvious way, is that he's always talking about, in the end of the day, it's all about emunah. And he says like this, that when you create the Mishkan first, or the Mishkan symbolizes, because it's like the overall surrounding environment, it is representing emunah, the basic understanding and belief that we know God is out there, that God is watching us, that God is with us. And that is it's a certain basic level, like it's a certain general surrounding atmospheric kind of level. And then and then the kalim, the vessels, the ark, which has the tablets in it, that has the luchot, that has the Torah, the Sefer Torah was put in the ark, and the kruvim were on top of it, the very, representative of Hashem's relationship with the Jewish people. So that was put into the ark. So that ark, or those vessels, represent the very high level of relationship between the Jewish people and Hashem, or more, they even represent the learning, the high level of learning, high level of keeping the Torah. And so there's a certain level of first you have this outwardly or simple level of emunah, and then you get to the higher levels of doing mitzvot, and also, having this abstract knowledge, more interesting, like connections and levels and higher spiritual understanding of Hashem. So Moshe Rabbeinu, who was on a bit of a higher level, felt that, he already has emunah down pat. He doesn't need to work on that. So in his mind, he was thinking, okay, let's go to the levels, the higher levels of abstract understanding God. And then, we can get to even higher levels of emunah. Meaning you first start with the abstract, with the knowledge, with the understanding, and then you get to very high levels of emunah, which is really, that is really where it's at. Like, the more you grow in your life, the more your emunah grows. You get closer and closer to Hashem. You understand, you feel it more. It becomes really internalized in your heart, not only in your mind. Whereas the basic level, which is what Hashem expected Bezalel to do and expected everyone to do, is first you create a very basic level of emunah, like just knowing that there's a God, like here in Israel. Honestly, there is not one person no matter how not religious they are, there's no one who does not have emunah. Everybody, every single person, every taxi driver, every market vendor, every shopkeeper, every beggar, homeless person on the street knows that there's God. That they have. Like on the lowest level, theoretically, you still can have emunah. So for them, for us basic people on the street, we need to first create the mishkan, first create that atmosphere, first have our emunah. That's a basic level. And then we can learn, we can understand, we can have all kinds of divrei Torah, we can reach higher and higher levels of connection to Hashem. So that was the disagreement, so to speak, between Bezalel and Moshe. Moshe was on a higher level, but he still felt that you can grow and grow and grow infinitely to the point where your emunah is so strongly felt that you will reach the levels that I see, for instance, with like the widows, unfortunately, from this war. The levels that they are reaching in emunah are not to be believed. They're not to be believed. You know, when you have a religious woman who lost her husband in the war and you hear what they have to say, I mean, this is like, to me, it sounds like Moshe Rabbeinu. These are people who are on the highest level of connection to Hashem. So I want to connect this all to Purim. So basically, what this is, first of all, just to sum this up. First, you have the level of Mishkan, which is creating the environment of emunah. Yes, we know there's a God. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Then you have the higher level where you're learning and you're a Torah Jew and you're keeping all these mitzvot and you're working on yourself and you're growing as a person. And then you reach even a higher level of emunah, which is more like Moshe Rabbeinu's status, where he first was keeping all the Torah, first was learning, and then he reaches the highest level of emunah, which is so integrated and so connected to him. Okay, I'm just going to connect this to Purim, and I'll do more Purim next week. But Purim is the Chag of Hester Panim. How do we know? What does Hester Panim mean? It means hiddenness of Hashem. And we know that. Everybody knows about Purim, that it's called Megillat Esther, right? It's called the Megillah of Esther. And Esther comes from the root of Hester, hiddenness. And we know that Hashem's name is not mentioned in the Megillah. And we know that everything was kind of like roundabout. And we didn't really see Hashem's presence. And everything was so obviously very, very horrible. Like there was a real tragedy going on. And the Jewish people were at a very, very low point in their existence. And all of a sudden there's this decree, and Haman comes up with this decree to destroy everyone. And it was so dark and it was so bad. And then everything turned around for the good, except that we don't quite realize that there was one person, one woman, Esther, who really got, who was like, really, on one hand, got credit for the entire Megillah. It's called Megillat Esther. Like, why wasn't it called the Megillah of Mordechai and Esther? Why wasn't it called the Megillah of the Jews and Haman? Why wasn't it called the Megillah of Nahafochu, the turnabout, you know? So Netivot Shalom says that Esther herself was in Haster Astir Panai. It says, where do we learn about Esther from the Torah? The Midrash says, and it says it in the Gemara, the Gemara of Megillah, it says that we learn it from the Pasuk in the Torah that says, I will hide, surely hide, Haster Astir. It's like a double hiding of Hashem's presence. And Netivot Shalom says that Purim is a holiday that the rabbis put into the Jewish calendar because they knew that the Jewish people are going to go into terrible exile and they are going to need something to keep them going when things are so dark and so hidden and so unclear that there's just no way out. You feel like there's no way out. So you need a holiday like this that is specifically talking about a double hiddenness. What do we mean by a double hiddenness? What Esther went through, you have to realize that in the end of the day, when all the Jewish people were busy celebrating and were busy so happy that they were saved because they, were about to be eradicated, they were about to be completely destroyed, and in the end they were saved. And Esther continued to live in the home of Achashverosh. she never quite saw the light. She never got out of captivity. For her, when she went into Achashverosh's room in order to, beg about the Jewish people, what she was really doing in a crazy way was kind of putting her own destiny in his hands. Like she was saying, that's it. Now I'm no longer forced to be in a relationship with you. She was actually choosing it. And according to the Gemara, up until that moment when she walked into Achashverosh's palace, Achashverosh's room, she was still considered married to Mordechai, according, obviously, to the opinion that she was married to Mordechai. But at least she was still a Jewish person who could then marry a Jewish man and could still be part of the Jewish people, because it wasn't her fault. It's like she was forced into this relationship. But once she walked willingly into that palace, what she was saying is, you know what? I'm with you. I agree to this relationship. I am begging you now. I am putting myself here in this position where I am going to be married to you. I'm willing to be married to you. And when you do that, if you're a Jewish girl and you're putting yourself, and you, let's say, are married before, and now you're married to this non-Jewish king, you're basically divorcing yourself from a Jewish life, from your Jewish husband. You're not allowed to do that, So for her, it was a double terrible darkness. It was a terrible darkness. It wasn't only a physical darkness. And says Netivot Shalom, we Jewish people can handle any physical darkness. We can. We know that we can. And I see it in this war. There is a physical darkness that is terrible. People are dying. People lose their sons. People lose their husbands. And there are hostages. And people have their kids in captivity. They're hostages or their husbands. It's beyond. It's horrible. But somehow they are able to feel Hashem, that Hashem is with them, that spiritually they did not lose hope. They did not lose faith. They feel Hashem. They feel that their life is purposeful and meaningful. It's unbelievable. When we were on this trip 2 weeks ago, we met a mom of a hostage, and she had so much emunah. She said, I believe absolutely 100% that my son is coming out of Gaza. He is going to be okay. I smell him. I think about him. I see an image of him in my mind. I'm singing songs that he sang. I'm literally using all my senses, and I ask you to do the same and to pray that he should come out and that he should be fine, and he will be fine. And I believe that he will be fine. I believe that Hashem is listening. She actually is saying all these words. So I think that people can handle a lot of physical, terrible darkness and hiddenness of Hashem. However, what they cannot handle, or what becomes extra hard to handle, is a double hiddenness, where it's spiritually hard and you do not feel Hashem's presence with you. And that's what Esther had to go through. And yet she still was able, in the palace of the king, when she felt such a terrible darkness and she felt like avaditi, ka'asher avaditi, I am lost and I am lost. Double lostness. She's lost from this world, because what kind of a life is that, right? To have, to be stuck with this horrible, hedonistic, disgusting, non-Jewish king. It's just not a life. And she really thought that she also might be lost from the next world. Maybe I'm just not supposed to be connected to the Jewish people in this decision that I'm making. But I'm going to make it anyway, because I know that Hashem loves me. And I know that Hashem is going to save his people. And if Hashem put me in this position, this is why I'm here. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I know that this is the right thing to do. And I know that Hashem wants me to do this. And I know Hashem will get me out of this. And it's all good. And even if I lose both worlds, it's all good. That is what she believed. And that is called bitachon. So what we'll talk about more next week is the fact that this holiday has tremendous power, specifically in the area of bitachon, which is trust. Okay, so we have to trust that Hashem loves us no matter what, even in the darkest of the dark, and even in times where we not only have a physical difficulty or a mental even or a emotional difficulty, but we also have a spiritual difficulty. We do not feel Hashem. We have to still know that he's there anyway, and we have to still know that he loves us and that everything is good. Okay? Let's try and work on that. Have a good Shabbos.